Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Of Fire and Bone, the Of Magic and Scales, Book 3 by Natalina Reis, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Call of the Ocean. "Will you stop that?" Fouchard's whisper reached my ears in a sudden blow of hot air. "Pay attention!" Attention had never been one of my fortes. I'd sat there for the past 20 minutes, listening to the buzz of people talking, an undercurrent of excitement in everyone's tone. I tried. I really, really tried to be still and feel as excited as everyone else was, including my mate. When we first arrived at the theater, I was in stitches. Hard to believe that after more than 2 years of living in Portugal, this was the first time I was attending a play. I'd gone to clubs pre-Fouchard and a couple movies, but had never set foot in a theater to enjoy a stage performance of any kind, which was strange, because I had been very active in D.C., even going as far as having season tickets to the Kennedy Center for performances that ranged from simple plays to operas. Sitting there at that small, intimate theater house made me itchy, though. Maybe it was because my Portuguese was still pretty rudimentary. Maybe it was the crowded space, or the fact that I was a different man than the one I had known and not loved a few months back. "Why is it taking so long?" I asked, miffed that my boyfriend had brushed my hand away from his upper thigh. I was restless, and when that happened, I could only think of one thing: how I could make my marrow scream out in ecstasy. Okay, so maybe this was not the time or place for that, but you couldn't blame a man for trying. It was a totally altruistic desire, or at least that's what I told myself when my mate practically hissed at me. "I'm bored, Nail!" Fouchard sicked his hooded brown eyes on mine and a warning in his posture. "What are you, Aiden, a child?" He might sound angry, but I knew him well enough by then that I could see the slight twitch of his lips, the precursor of all-out laughter. "It will start soon." Before he even finished the sentence, the lights flickered and the universal trois-coups hammering from behind the curtains announced the beginning of the play. "See, here we go. Can you stay still for once and enjoy this play?" I sighed, deeply exaggerating the level of my discontent with the whole thing. "What are we even watching?" I whispered, casually leaning against him. "Shh. Alrighty then, he wasn't going to indulge me this time." I slid further down my seat and got ready to at least attempt to pay attention to the performance. Hopefully the actors would speak slowly so I could understand what was happening. I could always take a nap, I guessed. My long legs didn't allow me to slide as far as I would like without entangling my feet with the women sitting in front of me, so I crossed them instead. My boyfriend surprised me by reaching for my hand and lacing his fingers through mine. That was more like it. The lights went off completely, the stage lights illuminating the scene taking place several rows ahead of us. I'd been extremely restless for the past couple of months, even since finding out that my father, the man who had abandoned me shortly after birth, was one of the monks who kindly sheltered and protected me and my new family. As the summer heat gave way to cooler temperatures, and the leaves on some of the trees began turning a beautiful rainbow of earthly colors, my discomfort with the whole situation only grew. I hadn't seen my father, Brother John, since the day the oracle had revealed that unsettling truth, and my heart had become a strange mixture of anxiety and longing. I wanted to connect, to get to know my father, but at the same time, I found it hard to forgive him, to forget being abandoned by the two people who should have loved me the most. I'd spent a miserably lonely childhood hating creatures who had been born into magical families like me, but not fitting into the mold of a regular human life either. I'd been an outcast my whole life, and I just recently understood why. I must have fallen asleep because I was startled almost out of my seat when applause erupted around us, and Fouchard practically jumped to his feet, exclaiming, "Bravo!" Still a bit dazed, I stared up at him in awe and surprise. Who would have guessed that that giant specimen of a merman was an enthusiastic supporter of the arts? I watched him, still slumped on my chair, taking full advantage of the fact he was thoroughly engaged with whatever was happening on the stage, which I couldn't see because everyone else was giving the actors a standing ovation. I apparently had slept through the whole thing. Oops. How was I going to explain to my boyfriend when he started talking about it? It wasn't as if I didn't enjoy a good play, but the mixture of my overall anxiety about my parentage and my lack of local language proficiency plotted against me. We left the theater house soon afterward, hand in hand, carried away in the wave of people and chatter. Outside, the night was warm with a touch of coolness typical of this time of year. We rode the wave until the crowd finally thinned out into almost nothing. The ocean, sparkling ahead over the wall that separated the coastal highway from the residential area, called me, a call so strong I could have sworn there were actual threads pulling on my arms and my legs. "Let's walk on the beach, Nail," I suggested, tugging on his hand. I often felt the urge to be near the beach, but this overwhelming pull was unusual. Fouchard raised an eyebrow and I shrugged. "Something is calling. Maybe I need to recharge after wasting so much energy trying to figure out what the actors were saying." My boyfriend snorted. "You mean sleeping, right? You were snoring by the end of the first act." I bumped my hip on his in protest. "I don't snore." I didn't. At least I didn't think I did. He smiled and leaned over to plant a kiss on my lips. "Okay, not a snore, but that adorable sexy sound you make when you are deep asleep." I'd never heard him talk about this. "It's sort of the same sound you make when we're making love." I actually blushed. Shit, who knew what X-rated dreams I had while we were in the theater? Had I made any more embarrassing noises? He cupped my cheek with his other hand and brushed a thumb over my hot skin. "Made me want to take you home and ravish you." For a moment I hesitated. Should I listen to the call of the sea or let my man take me home? Tempting, but I must go to the beach. I couldn't believe it was me uttering those words. I'd definitely changed. I pulled out on his hand and we resumed our stroll toward the sparkling waters. The closer we got, the stronger that magnetic pull was, and soon I was practically dragging my Murrow toward it, blinded by the urgency of the call. "Slow down, sweetheart," Fouchard said, digging in his heels and stopping me. "What's the rush? You're freaking me out a little." I swallowed, glancing at the view of the ocean across the road and then at my boyfriend. I don't know what this is," I said, anxiety taking residence in my chest. "It's weird, but I can't resist it. I feel as if there are hands pulling me to the beach, to the ocean." Fouchard stood in silence for a moment as if considering my words. "I don't like it, Aiden," he finally said, a frown pulling down the corner of his lips. "After everything that happened to you, to us, this does not bode well. Should we call for reinforcements, Taz or Silva?" I shook my head. I wasn't sure of much, but I could assure him of one thing at least. It's not evil. It won't harm us," I muttered, my eyes roaming to the sea again. "I don't understand how I know this, but I do. We'll be okay." He thought about it for a heartbeat, and then he walked beside me, his long legs devouring the space between us and the ocean waters. We had to veer off down the road some distance because there were no crossing spots close by, and that coastal highway was busy with cars that zoomed by like honeybees on a mission. But soon we were on the beach side, tracking down a walking path to take us down to the white sands. I kicked my shoes off as soon as they hit the yielding ground, not bothering to pick them up, and charged to the water's edge instead, Fouchard in tow. When the cool, salty water washed over my bare feet, soaking the edges of my jeans, I sighed as if whatever was growing inside me had finally relaxed its grip. I squeezed my merman's hand, but didn't say anything. He took a deep inhale beside me, and I followed suit. The briny air was a tender perfume that relaxed me one muscle at a time, and it had the same effect on my man. Maybe I had some merfolk DNA after all. Since nobody seemed to really know who or what I was, it seemed a definite possibility. "Feeling better?" Fouchard asked me after a moment. The ocean spread in front of us, dark and sparkling under the moonlight, reflecting the stars that studded the sky. I was feeling better, but rather confused. What exactly had me running to the water's edge? My boyfriend read my thoughts as usual. "Let's stay here for a while," he said, turning his gorgeous face to me. "Afterward, you'll be all recharged and full of energy to make me cry in pleasure when we get home." He winked, and parts of me immediately responded to his words. "Men haven't changed much over the centuries." The female voice behind made us jump, and my heart stampeded up my throat. A beautiful woman stood a few feet away from us, barefoot in the wet sand with a complacent smile on her lips. What a pity. I was so hoping that it improved, and that the male of the species could actually hold a thought That didn't include sex or war. I bristled at her words. Not fair and not true. I had lots of other thoughts, and I never thought of war unless I had to. I might have been a man whore not that long ago, but I was now a well-rounded human being. But more to the point, who was this woman? She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place my finger on it. Sorry, do we know you? She was beautiful with dark skin, long shiny black hair, and elegant in her blue sari. Wait, sorry? Shit, was she another goddess out to get me? I blatantly positioned myself between her and Fouchard in case she tried to hurt him. Don't worry, Aiden, she said with a wave of her hand. I have no intentions of hurting either of you. I need to talk to you, that's all. My shoulders relaxed, but I stayed on guard. What do they say? Once bitten, twice shy? What do you want? She tisked, her dark as onyx eyes filled with mischief. So suspicious. Our fault, I guess. Her cryptic words made me blink. I came with a warning, child. Unfortunately, your would-be assassins are back in Portugal and gathering forces to try to kill you. Not the best news, but then again I knew it. As much as I wished the deadly duet had left for good, that the hate didn't just dissipate, but rather grew and expanded, fed by the desire to wield more power. We kind of figured they'd be back, but what's that to you? Neither your father or I want to see you hurt after all that was sacrificed to keep you safe and sound for over 30 years. She knew my father? Who was she? Be at the ready. They will attack when you least expect it, so expect it at all times. Lovely advice, and so conducive to a happy, relaxed life. I must go now, but I will come back. Who are you? Fouchard asked from behind me, his hand on my shoulder. The woman smiled again, brought her palms together to her chest, and bowed slightly. Namaste, children, she said before turning around and walking into the ocean. A mermaid? I looked up at Fouchard, who shrugged as if to say he'd never seen her before. She kept walking against the calm waves, her translucent sari floating around her like a cloud of blue. In a heartbeat later, she had vanished under the waters. Had she been the one calling me here? Well, that was interesting, I mused, still staring at the dark spot where she had disappeared. Why would she come and warn me, and how does she know my father? When I raised my eyes to my mate's, his lifted eyebrows caught my attention. Are you kidding? He said. You're really that clueless? What? I had no idea what he was talking about. Clueless about what? He sighed, dropping his arms along his body in exaggerated frustration. I can't be sure, but I think she gave us enough clues as to who she is. I raised my brow. Seriously? He shook his head. She was obviously Indian, and she talked about the sacrifice made by her and your father to protect you. Who else could she be? A wave of recognition crushed down on me. How could I have missed it? Fuck my thick brain. Lakshmi, I whispered in awe. My mother.